In this episode, I want to talk about text tiling. And text tiling, as you can see here, is already illustrated. And it means that we take one image by itself and we copy that again and again and again. And there's of course an automatic for that in Cinema 4D. We can set up the numbers how often we want to have it horizontally or vertically. That's all very nice and good, but there's of course something in it that is not really a high quality, because as you can see here, all these words, they don't look really nice. Maybe just from the first start, but as a texture, I have my doubts. And we have two mindsets about textures, because some people like to have one texture not tiled at all. And if tiling is needed, then they take maybe one tile and they extend only a little bit. So this here would be the whole picture, and we have only a little bit here on this side and maybe up and there. So the extension of the tiling is only a little bit. This includes also when we have objects like a tree, for example, where we can't see all the time the complete texture. Then we can say we take a tile like this and then we copy this around. Wherever the camera goes then around, it can't be seen that there is a repetition. And repetition is exactly the main idea what a tiling texture should have. Nothing that indicates that there's a repetition. And that excludes a lot of images, textures, and so on. In the following, I want to explain that, of course, and I want to go here along with some images to explain more in detail what I have in mind. Keep in mind that we have now here part 1, that means the theoretical part. We go then to part 2, to the practical part, and in part 3 we go into the post-production, how we manage all of this data then finally to get into Cinema 4D. Okay, all of that can go, and we go now along some images to explore where I would think it's good to tile or not at all. In the following pictures I have taken images, of course, that might work, that might not work at all. Okay, this picture here is clearly something that we can't tile vertically. That makes no sense. And even if we would mirror that, that is possible as well in Cinema 4D, to take then this edge here and go with this stone then on the mirror axis then directly and then so on. That looks maybe horrible. So the only way that we have here is given horizontally. And we could think about to overlap maybe this stone here with this stone and create something that repeats then. And we have to take a look if this pattern here, exactly here, is always exactly this one. And you can see here it's always on the middle. That would work here just for the stone logic here. But again, then we have here, and I take here the signs away for a moment, we have stains here. Not nice. We can take this out, but we have also areas like this here which will show up very fast because it doesn't repeat here a lot. So we have stains, 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 small, bigger, bigger, biggest, and that will indicate immediately that we have something like a pattern. That's not nice. And of course here's a bigger one. Here we have a stain. We can take this all away, but it might be not the best idea to take as a tileable texture. But if you need this, maybe for a column also where it goes around, that might be an idea. The next one looks promising from the start, but in the moment you take a closer look, first of all, you want always to shoot perpendicular to the face here of this wall, and this is not a given. As you can see here, these lines go up, these lines go down, and you can see here inside of this window but not on this side. So we are not really perpendicular to it. We can stretch this, of course. That means we go with this edge out, we go with this edge out, and we get something rectangular. But such an operation finally mixes all these pixels here all over the place, and we get blurry pixels here. If we have a high resolution and we can scale it down, no problem at all. This window here and this big stain here, that is a dead giveaway that we have a tileable texture here. Because the window could be repeated, but then again here, that metal or whatever inside it is, that is maybe a little bit, yeah, I don't know, takes the secret out. And then we have some minor stains here. This is visible in a texture tiling. That's not nice. So things like this one here is easily repairable with the stamp tool. But all in all, maybe not really my favorite texture here, and that is why I have chosen it to talk about. Absolutely not at all. And of course, we could create something with the stamp tool here. So we take a little bit from this area, a little bit from this, and go then in this way and take here something, and we can create a lot here. But with this color here, this big stain or spot here, I don't see it. And of course, always a little area here with the green that wouldn't fit. Of course, this color looks pretty much like this. So anyway, you see already my point here, I guess. And here we have a candidate where I think that could work. We can see here there was a repair. One day there was maybe a window or something like that. As my old professor in the architecture time told me always, walls tell you a story. And this tells you a story. And when this is repeated, you will see this. Maybe not on the first glance, but it might show up. But not so much at all. So this is so far my favorite in this series here. And we have to stretch it perhaps because it's not really straight here. So we have these lines here. This is straight, so there is not so much to do, but we have to understand the pattern, how this is done. So we have here always a half one, and this side, or a full one, a half one, and then it splits here with two full, and so on. And this is pretty much a pattern that you will see here all over the wall, and you have to find then an area that is exactly like this. And that could be here, for example, split here again, small one, and you have then to go down to find exactly then here this point. So we go down, we have here the split, for example, we have here also split. We have a stone, a long one, and the small one. So we could say we can go with the split here to this split. So this would be the maximum for this texture. One corner, this would be a corner of the picture, and then of course we know already this would be here. So from here to here and from there to there, that would be the usable area. Perhaps we could go maybe one more, but I have problems to see that here and I have problems to see that there. That would be my first cut with the perspective, and then I go ahead. But this is all for the practical part. I want to give you here only an idea how I would find these patterns here, and the bricklayers have normally some kind of patterns in it, and if they don't mess it up, they repeat it endlessly. Let's have a look to the next one. This could be very interesting, and there's also a pattern in it. We have here always one more or less vertical, and then we have here 5 rows and then a vertical again, 5 rows and a vertical again. But you can see already it is not really clear. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it's there. Then you don't have at all anyone. To find here a pattern might be a little bit problematic. And when you have here always a long side, and then just to get the pattern right, a half stone, that would show up maybe after a while. So if you find here a pattern, nice, but I think it's very splotchy. It's maybe a dead giveaway for the whole thing. But again, we normally say we can use maybe 1.5 from a tile texture. So this would be here the first repetition, or we wrap it around. I do not suggest to use it maybe 100 or 20 times, and then you get a pattern, which I will discuss later on. This is certainly a very nice part of a texture, but it's certainly not something that I would at all use as a tiled texture, because this triangle here, or this area here, is pretty much different to this one here. And so to mix and match this in a tile level texture, that might be a problem. And then we have here dark areas, very dark ones, and that shows up in a repetition very, very fast. Not a good one. Oops, and we go here to the next one. Also, where I think that this area here and all of that is too unique. You might get something in it, but it shows up. If you use it only 1 or 2 times, perhaps 1.5, that will work, but I wouldn't go further with that. Then something like this here looks first promising, but these stains here gives it away. It's maybe a very simple texture, and we could take maybe a stone like this here and make a tileable texture just out of one. That could work, but it's pretty boring, of course. That's not the idea what we want to have. We want to have variety in it, but this here, I don't think so. This is fantastic, and in this area here, roughly, we will find something that might work. And you can see there is some color here, some color there. When you look very close and you repeat it too often, this will show up. And it's darker here at all in the lower area, and in the top area it's brighter. So when this edge here is then attached to this area, it will show up a lot. So we have to go into post-production to change the brightness here, of course, and that's possible, and I will show you how to do it. And when it's done, perhaps this will work, and maybe we take this as example here. Okay, here we can see something that is very obvious, and I hope you can see that already, because when I take here a line, a straight line, it's maybe too thin, or from here and I go then, and here on the floor maybe as well, from here to there. Doesn't follow with me. Okay, now it goes. You can see here this wall, I think it was straight, but I would suggest that this has a wide angle lens with a distortion in it, and that is not preferable. Of course, you can make a lens distortion repair here and get this flat, but then you move every single pixel in the picture, and the quality goes down at least by 2. That's not fun and not nice. And the only area that I see here is maybe here, because windows to repeat is pretty difficult. I'll come to this in a second. This looks nice from the start, but we have here areas where I think this maybe shows up here. I would take this out with the stamp tool. These veins here in the stone, that might work. This here is a little bit too heavy. The double one is too significant, and maybe this one here as well. So if you take those things out, this wall here looks very nice and very promising. Then something like this, totally perspective, very small details here, very wide ones here. This works only horizontally, and of course not with this spot in it, and I would take those darker areas here out and something like this, and grass areas like this. I would take just some leaves and stamp them in. That might work for a background, and of course when you project this, then that would work, but it's not really a perspective texture. It's something that might not work on the long run on a flat object. I have put it here in because you can see here very clearly it's a perspective, and that's absolutely not what I would suggest. Always perpendicular to the surface if possible. And here we come to the idea what I want to show you with the windows, because this is a natural repetition, not something that I have done. It's not tileable, and we can see here in this area, and we can see here in this area. And I take this out instantly so you can see it finally. And here in the middle there's nothing from these side areas. You see here there's white little thingy, and I make my brush here a little bit smaller. This area here is in my mind, and you can see here a little bit, but it's not visible here. And this is what we expect when we have an object really in perspective. If we would tile now any of these windows, we would run into problems, except maybe for this one here, and with a little concern maybe these ones. But this window here and this window here is not tileable, because it would look horrible when we have always one view and it goes even to the left side away from the camera. It's pretty much like this area and this area in comparison. I would think only vertically, but not more. And then we have a problem here, because this should be smaller after a while and this wider, and in the other direction the same. I hope you get my point. But you could maybe for a background object tile the whole thing here. And it's already in square, because that was the target here for this, to have something in the background. It's nothing in the foreground because it has perspective in it, and it should be used for camera projection. This is something where I have my concerns from the start. Of course, when we have something that is a little bit from the camera in this perspective direction, then it could work. But if we move, for example, when we have, I need to make that bigger again, whoops. When we have here a building from the top and the roof is here, and we have a camera view in this direction, the camera moves here around. We could look now here from this starting point that the tiles of the roof is exactly in this way, and it would work. It would work even to our advantage, but in the moment we reach this position, it is exactly in the opposite direction, and it would look horrible. I will go into that later on in this series, but this is not the way I would suggest anything. This is difficult when we have perspective lines in it. Here in this picture, I would think horizontally, of course, that will work. And maybe to take here some of these drops out would help enormously, and this area here will give it away. The dark areas not so much. The vertical one is not at all an option. I don't see that, because this black line here will give it away. I would stamp tool this out here, this area, and after more and more inspection, this area here perhaps, and maybe this small one here. Okay, I take this all out so you can see it again, and it looks from the start promising. And maybe if you stamp out in Photoshop this black stripe here with something, I could think that could work. Of course, all these old green stuff here, that is maybe problematic. Okay, and that ends here this series. What I wanted to show you here is only one more thing here in the Lightroom, and here I have something where I think we can do something like this very easily. Always make best chart so you get really something neutral. We will talk about this as well. And as you can see, the light is pretty diffuse. There's nearly no shadow. We have here some areas where I would have my problems to say tile this, and we have here something similar, so there's a repetition, but you can stamp here over. There's no perspective in it. Only here this leaf could make some problems, but when you take a square out of this one and you stamp tool this as long as possible to get here something like a floor or so, then it might work. So one more thing, and that means I go now to Cinema 4D. And as we discuss now here things, I would love to give you here some hints, and I have done something here. This is a cork tile, and I can show you that it's exactly this texture here, and open the window so I can show you that bigger. These are very easily to tileable textures here. They have a random pattern, really hard to see if there's a tileable thing or not. And I go here to the picture viewer to show you that. You can see here some lines in it when you look very closely, and that's the tileable one. It's already a very good texture. It has some limitations on these edges here. And to break this down or break this away, I have exaggerated here, of course, something to show you when you overlay just a noise texture with transparency and everything, you get all these natural stains in something like this, because this looks artificial here, and with the tile lines here that I can see, I hope the compression doesn't eat it away. With these noise patches or noise spots, you can break this in a way that the repetition is not so much visible anymore. Again, this is way over the top just to make it visible what I have here. So to show you the effect even more, I have scaled here this up and down, so you can see here maybe these lines now. I hope the compression works for me here to my target. I change here the texture, and of course one big thing here is this moire pattern that goes away when I have my anti-aliasing on. But when I go here, you can see there are lines in it. You see these lines, the repetition, that is a dead giveaway that you have only a small one. So the best is of course to go very close, then the texture has not the resolution that we need, but that's another theme. And you can go a little bit inside, and these repetitions are maybe not that obvious. Again, to put a noise shader over it, and I'll show you that here. It's just an alpha with a noise and transparency to change the whole thing. And inside of the color is again something that fits to the colors of this pattern. And then I overlay it, and it gets some stains, some darker, some brighter areas. And with only transparency, it changes the flow here. But more visible it will be with, and I take here my noise away, when you have something that is, of course, very, very even. You see here these spots. That's not nice, and that looks like CG, something that I would avoid on all costs. One idea is, of course, to take the tile and maybe have many of them and change some details so you get a larger tile, maybe 3x3, and with the stamp tool you take out some of these repetition indicators. Okay, one more here, just for the fun. We had this, and maybe we want to see this again. So we have here then white or brighter areas, and this shows up as well. Not so nice. When I go very close, I can see the repetition here, but it's not so obviously. And normally we have stuff on top of that. Okay, I think you got the point, how those things are constructed and how we capture them and how we do it then finally in post-production is for part 2 and for part 3. Thanks for listening. Have fun with it. Bye bye.